I saw this article the other day, and it struck me as being somewhat significant to the Mandela Effect and the Mandela Effect community. And it was its title basically said "Impossible Discovery Found on Remote Island Off African Coast, a Lost Part of the World." This is not a judgment on that kind of material. I've done that kind of material. I've argued particularly the Ed McMahon Mandela Effect and the Publishers Clearinghouse. I dedicated multiple videos to that. But I also dedicated multiple videos with our exploration of World War II and us finding that indeed, if you dig deeper into history and parts of World War II, you will find anomalies that have either not been reported or they change in this kind of moving kind of framework that we can't quite comprehend or understand. In the last few decades, phenomena have been reported worldwide which do not conform to the framework of modern physics and have presented a considerable crisis for our science, that is, our rational perception of the world. Confusion in our knowledge goes back to Newton's mathematical principles of natural philosophy. On the basis of the thesis, Newton added indicating the primary factors of gravity and pleaded that he could not but exclude something which permeates and is concealed within matter in general, and that is the spiritus of function of consciousness. So it says here, in fact, Newton is said to have had all but failed to develop a theory of gravity using a matterless ether, i.e. consciousness. So how does that play into this article? So the point of the article isn't that it actually totally pivots on what I just read here. And the point of the article isn't exactly the totality of the argument I'm going to make here. But the point of the article is that there are different, this is a perfect example of all these smaller Mandela effects that are probably happening. And they're being reported in mainstream media, but because they don't have the language, and then we have the language, but we're not connecting these instances to the Mandela effect, it doesn't help, our case being an ME and having personal Mandela effects versus worldwide Mandela effects. And I would like to say that I think there's the possibility that there's all kinds of these different Mandela effects happening all the time that we're just not picking up on. And there has to be ramifications to a lot of these Mandela effect categories, particularly technology before its time and the geo shifts that we have. Now, we know that the Mandela effect is connected in part, if not all, to the Schumann resonance and the frequency spikes that happen between the Schumann resonance and the frequency spikes that happen within the human body. And I've have multiple videos that go into that, talk about that. So that's not really So let's get into the article. It says here, researchers have found rocks on a small island between Madagascar and the eastern coast of Africa, a discovery that has been described as mysterious for one very important reason. They shouldn't be there. So these rocks should not be on this particular island. The rocks in question, quartzite, were discovered by researchers at Columbia University, thanks to a grant from the National Geographic Society. They had heard about them from a number of different media reports, but were finally able to confirm the presence of the quartzite, which is usually found in areas that have high temperatures and pressures for themselves. This is contrary to plate tectonics, says Cornelia Klass, a geochemist at Columbia University, in a blog post titled "Quartzite Bodies Do Not Belong on Volcanic Islands." So let's stop right there. A lot of things happen right there. So first, what they're saying is that this shouldn't be happening. Okay? So it shouldn't be happening at all, which that's fine that science likes to say those kinds of things of what should be or shouldn't be happening. But the fact is, it did happen. And I know I rail on and on about science and scientism, but ultimately it's not about science itself. It's about the sort of political and economic arm of science that has become sort of this de facto kind of invisible political faction that is probably more powerful than most governments around the world. So the point is that these scientists are saying these things aren't supposed to be there, but again, they are there. But the point is, they understand. Scientists are not admitting, but they understand something isn't right, something is off. Now, being an MB, ME, and being Mandela affected myself, naturally, I'm going to veer towards what? The Mandela effect, particularly whenever I read an article like this. There was probably a geoshift, and something happened within that particular geoshift, and voila, you have something that defies science. What I think is that these geoshifts and these shifts in general are going to continue, and as they continue, what's going to happen is more and more articles like this are going to accumulate. My biggest fear is that no one in the Mandela effect community puts that together and starts to put a kind of coherent timeline or library together of these announcements that have happened, and to say, okay, sure, this one particular article, that's fine. This one particular article doesn't prove anything about the Mandela effect. However, if you take the Mandela effect, you take the theory of the Mandela effect, and then you take these particular articles, and with those, you take these, CIA documents and all kinds of other literature that's out there, and you put it together, and suddenly you can realize, fine, if you don't believe in the Mandela effect, or you don't believe in whatever it is we're saying, you can at least agree that something is not right in terms of your understanding of existence and reality and how it's supposed to be reacting, how it's supposed to be behaving. Because the way that this article is written and the way that these scientists are writing it, it's almost as if they're admonishing reality for defying their laws. And I just want to concentrate on that and think about that for a minute. We have a community so powerful that not only do they expect governments to bend to their will, they expect that reality to actually bend to their laws and their formulas from which they've drawn upon, where they're saying that, these laws are being broken. Well, reality is reality, and consciousness is consciousness. And if you read the other document that I put in there, the CIA FOIA gateway process, it talks about reality itself just being a hologram of consciousness that springs forth from our mind. So the point I'm making about this is that I want to start building articles around Mandela effect shifts and geo shifts, and not just pointing out individual instances from technology before its time, but trying to really take the mainstream narrative and actually incorporate it as a thread that we can weave into the broader Mandela effect canon, leveling it up, taking it to a new level, and to be able to add that to our arsenal. Recently we started adding in some of the arguments we can talk about is not just C3PO's leg, or like I talked about, I went on this tangent about Ed McMahon for a while. And it didn't dawn on me when we went through our World War II discovery phase. As we started to go through all of the articles, all of the literature about World War II, we were shocked to find out that indeed history was nothing like the way it was presented to us. Now, was that ignorance on our part, or was it a Mandela effect? That can still be argued, and that's fine. And I'll take that criticism and I'll take that critique, and that's fine.